Hello my dear students. Today we are going to study the short story The Romance of a Busy Broker. The Romance of a Busy Broker, written by O.Henry. O.Henry is a famous short story writer. He was born in North Carolina, USA in the year 1862 and he died in the year 1910. His latter life he spent in Texas. He is one of the most prolific short story writers of America. He has written about 600 short stories. He began to write at the age of 20 when he was serving a 5-year term in prison on false charges. He was put in jail for 5 years and he started his writing career in the prison, in the jail. The major concern of his stories was the life of the ordinary people in the New York City. Most of his stories revolve around the ordinary people's lives in the New York City. His stories are popular for their remarkable narrative technique and surprise ending. His short stories, my dear students, please keep this in mind. They are very famous for surprise endings. It is also called as twist in the tale. TWIST, twist in the tale. TALE. This short story is about Harvey Maxwell, an extremely busy broker in the city of New York. He is a workaholic person and he is referred to as machine in the story more than once. The world of finance and brokerage keeps him so busy that he has no time for personal life, to enjoy his personal life. He has become absent-minded, that he even forgets the fact that he was married to his secretary, Miss Leslie, just the previous evening. He makes a proposal to the same lady again. "Will you be my wife?" She has to remind him gently at the end of the story, "Don't you remember, Harvey? Don't you remember, Harvey? We were married last evening at 8 o'clock in the little church around the corner." Okay, so this was the introduction about the story. Now we will read the story in detail. The Romance of a Busy Broker. Picture a personal clerk in the office of Harvey Maxwell. Picture a personal clerk in the office of Harvey Maxwell, broker, looked with mild interest and surprise when his employer entered at 9:30 in company with his young lady secretary. With a quick good morning picture, Maxwell dashed towards his desk as though he were going to jump over it, and then plunged into the great heap of letters and telegrams waiting for him. The young lady had been Maxwell's secretary for a year. She was beautiful in a way that was quite unsecretarial. She dressed in a very simple manner. She wore no chains, bracelets or lockets. She did not look as though she were going to accept an invitation for the lunch. Her dress was grey and plain, but fitted her very well. In her neat black hat was the golden feather of a parrot. On this morning she was softly and shyly glowing. Her eyes were dreamily bright, her cheeks rosy, her expression a happy one, with a touch of some sweet memory. Picture, still mildly curious, noticed a difference in her ways this morning. Instead of going straight into the next room, where her desk was, she stayed in the outer office for some time. Once she moved over by Maxwell's desk, near enough for him to feel her presence. The machine sitting at that desk was no longer a man. It was a busy New York broker, moved by wheels and springs. "Well, what is it? Anything?" asked Maxwell sharply. His open mail lay in heaps on his crowded desk. His keen grey eyes flashed upon her half impatiently. "Nothing," answered the secretary, moving away with a little smile. "Mr. Peacher," she said to the personal clerk, "did Mr. Maxwell say anything yesterday about appointing another secretary?" "He did," answered Peacher. "He told me to get another one. I asked the agency yesterday afternoon to send over a few girls this morning. It's 9:45 and not a single one has showed up yet." "I will do the work as usual then," said the young lady, "until someone comes to fill the place." And she went to her desk at once, and hung the black hat with the gold-green parrot feather in its usual place. There is no man busier than a New York broker, and this day was Harvey Maxwell's busiest day. The teleprinter began to send out lengths of tape. The desk telephone rang non-stop. Men began to crowd into the office. Messenger boys ran in and out with messages and telegrams. The clerks in the office jumped about like sailors during a storm. Suddenly Peacher came in with a young girl. "Lady from the secretary's agency to see about the job," said Peacher. Maxwell turned half round with his hands full of papers and teleprinter tapes. "What job?" he asked with a frown. "Job of secretary," said Peacher. "You told me yesterday to call them up and have one sent over this morning." You are losing your mind, Peacher," said Maxwell. "Why should I given you such an order? Miss Leslie has given perfect satisfaction during the year she has been here. The place is here as long as she likes. There is no place open here, madam. Cancel that order with the agency, Peacher, and don't bring any more of them in here." The young lady left the office a little angrily. Peacher said quietly to the bookkeeper that the old man seemed to get more absent-minded and forgetful with every day that passed. The rush and speed of business grew fiercer and faster. Orders to buy and sell were coming and going as rapidly as the flight of birds. The man was working like some high-powered, delicate, strong machine, wound to full tension, going at full speed, exact, never hesitating, with a proper word and decision, and ready and prompt as clockwork. Stocks and bonds, loans, shares, securities, here was a world of finance, and there was no place in it for the human world of nature. When the lunch hour drew near, there came a slight pause in the uproar. Maxwell stood by his desk with his hands full of telegrams and letters, with a fountain pen over his right ear, and his hair hanging in untidy strings over his forehead. His window was open. The spring air was pleasantly warm, and through the window came a wandering smell, a delicate, sweet smell of lilac, that made the broker stand still for a moment. For this smell belonged to Miss Leslie. It was her own and hers only. The smell brought her clearly before him. It was as if he could touch her if he reached out his hand. The world of finance was forgotten, and she was in the next room, 20 steps away. "By heaven, I will do it now," said Maxwell, half aloud. "I will ask her now. I wonder why I didn't do it long ago. He dashed into the inner office. He charged upon the desk of the secretary. She looked up at him with a smile. A soft pink crept over her cheek, and her eyes were gentle and smiling. Maxwell leaned one elbow on her desk. He still clutched letters and papers with both hands, and the pen was above his ear. "Miss Leslie," he began hurriedly, "I have only a moment to spare. I want to say something in a moment. Will you be my wife? I haven't had time to show my love to you in the ordinary way, but I really do love you. Talk quick, please. I am very busy." "Oh, what are you talking about?" exclaimed the young lady. She rose to her feet and gazed upon him round-eyed. "Don't you understand?" said Maxwell a little impatiently. "I want you to marry me. I love you, Miss Leslie. I wanted to tell you, and I was able to take a minute when things had slowed down a bit. They are calling me to the phone now. Tell them to wait a minute, Peacher. Won't you, Miss Leslie?" The secretary acted very strangely. At first she seemed overcome with surprise, and then tears flowed from her wondering eyes, and then she smiled cheerfully through them, and one of her arms slid tenderly about the broker's neck. "I know now," she said softly. "It is this old business that has driven everything else out of your head for the time. I was frightened at first. Don't you remember, Harvey? Don't you remember, Harvey? We were married last evening at 8 o'clock. We were married last evening at 8 o'clock in the little church around the corner." Thank you very much.